for me, as someone who is far removed from people, to get out and go to those conferences once or twice a year is everything. And it makes me sad that a lot of people are finding all of their bee education on YouTube but nowadays, because I think that getting together in a room with like-minded people and learning together has a value that you will never get on YouTube. So I do still want to put my effort into making it out to those conferences. I'm hoping that through being on the executive, I can help to draw people from the online space into the in-person space.
From the Oregon State University Extension Service, this is PolliNation, a podcast that tells the stories of researchers, land managers, and people like you who are making bold strides to improve the health of pollinators. I'm your host, Dr. Adoni Melathopoulos, Associate Professor of Pollinator Health in the Department of Horticulture. Okay, Harry, new year. We have a new season of the commercial beekeeping segment. Who are you going to hear from today?
Today, we're going to talk with Christine McDonald, who runs a wonderful family beekeeping operation out of Terrace, British Columbia. Her and her husband and her two beautiful children work to produce some very, very fine honey, candles. They sell nucleus hives, and yet they live hundreds of miles north of the United States border, and we just have to be envious of many other techniques that we'll hear about today.
You know what I found really remarkable is sometimes being in the middle of nowhere and being in a maybe not a major honey producing area can be seen as a liability, but Christine really, talking about their operation really has turned all of those liabilities into assets. And one example that I'm sure all our listeners know about if you're a beekeeper and on Instagram is this amazing online presence that she has on Instagram. But what I thought was so refreshing is the way that that's also incorporated into, it's into a real community of real beekeepers on the ground.
One of the first tips I was given as a brand new beekeeper, probably in the first month here in Oregon, was beekeeping is not a standalone endeavor. We need each other as a beekeeping community. And Christine McDonald and her family serve as a very good example of that. Up in the remote area, but working with local beekeepers and communicating to all the rest of us on Instagram.
Okay, well, let's head way far north to Terrace, British Columbia, this week on PolliNation.
Christine McDonald, it's so good to see you today on PolliNation. I was looking at your weather up there in Terrace, British Columbia, and it looks like that you're at -7 up there. And I just want you to know that nobody on this podcast will hear crying and whining from Salem, Oregon here. So great to have you on PolliNation. How's things looking up there?
It has been cold. We've got a fair amount of snow, and usually I love to go out and check the bees in the snow, and it's a great time to just smell and listen and take some pictures because it's beautiful. But unfortunately, I broke my foot a couple weeks ago, so I am not hobbling through the snow to any bee yards this year.
Yikes. It's always good when things like that come up in the off season, that's for sure.
The timing was right, for sure.
Now, your bee season up there in British Columbia is quite a bit different than ours down here. So bees will be huddled up nice and warm until March?
Yeah, we'll get a few flying days in February. Even though we're quite far north, we are fairly coastal, so we're warmer, much warmer than even 2 hours further inland. So we'll get a few flying cleansing days in February, but then we don't unwrap our hives or really start to see much activity until March.
Until March, okay. And then I assume the job as number one is to get in and see stores are available
Yes.
up there.
Yes. We have such a long winter that hefting is a really important strategy for us, so we do start to monitor hive weights just by going around and kind of lifting, tilting from the back in the new year. So we'll start that as soon as I can make it out there.
Do you winter in singles or doubles?
Ye we winter in whatever that particular colony is kind of
Oh,
suited for. Typically, it's more doubles. This is the first year ever where we have more singles than doubles.
is there like a weight target weight for that long cold winter up there?
Not really. I find that the almost the ratio of, like, bees to stores is more important than some set weight number that we aim to hit, but I like to refer to I think it's a Bob Binneyism that just when you lift the boxes, whether it's 1 or 2, every box that is there should feel like a box full of rocks. So that's what we aim for.
That's great. I've been going through our nucleus hives, installing little fondant patties, and seems like it's been such a warm spring that they've consumed more than I'm
Oh,
used to
wow.
seeing at this.
Has that been an issue in BC? Are you having a warm winter? Or is there worries about them going through feed quick?
No, we have not been talking or hearing about that this year. We had an unusually warm fall, but it was warm enough that the bees were actually still active and flying. So we had to do a ton of feeding kind of through September and up to October when there was no more flower resources out there, but our bees were still very, very active. So we were feeding a painful amount of syrup this painful for the wallet.
Well, maybe let's get into winter. Let's talk a little bit of winter. How do you, you have singles and you have doubles. How do you get them ready for winter? And I did notice on your, and if people don't know your Instagram feed, it is a really great, I find, source for all sorts of beekeeping education. But you had these pictures of these cards that are drilled to the back of the. Tell us a little bit of how you get ready for winter and what those cards are for.
Yeah, so those cards actually stay on all year round, and it's something that we just started using this year. Our business is just my husband and I. We're the only 2 that go in hives and do any of the bee work. But even though it's the 2 of us, it's a challenge to communicate, like, what is going on in each colony. And so I made these cards. They're actually just I designed them in an app called Canva. That's just a graphic design app, and I printed them as stickers and then stuck them onto corrugated plastic like old election signs. And it's a visual that is stuck to the back of the hive. It's about 6 inches by 3 inches, and it has all these different kind of potential hive scenarios on it. So there's a hive strength rating out of 5. There's the queen colors, and then different types of queens that we use. There's honey scale out of 3, whether there's mites, whether there's any signs of disease. And each one is a space where you can stick a tack if that thing applies. So, for example, if there is a blue queen in there and it's a rushing river, it's one of our queens, then we would have a tack in blue and a tack in rushing river and a tack in 4 out of 5 for strength, for example. So it's a way that at a glance we can tell what's going on in a hive. In terms of winter, we actually use a lot of different wintering things, different types of wraps and different styles, and mostly it's because I have never been so convinced that one thing is the way that I have fully invested, like, financially in that thing. So we use 3 different kinds of wraps. We have some top entrances open, some condensing hives with top entrances closed. I love to play around with them and kind of observe the differences in survival and strength in the spring. But honestly, up to now, I have not been fully convinced of one over the others, so we continue to just have a mix, and I think when it comes to wintering, the more important thing is having strong, healthy colonies going in with low varroa loads, and then everything that you do on top of that is just a bonus.
I think I was at a meeting in Calgary, and there's that engineer in the Yukon somewhere who came up with this whole
ETN.
idea. Yeah, this whole thing about a condensing hive. What is can you just run us through the principle of that? It's sort of the opposite of how I was trained.
Yeah, I think it is still really counterintuitive for a lot of people because we often hear that moisture kills bees. It's not cold, it's moisture that kills bees. And so we try to get moisture out of the hives. But the idea with a condensing hive is that bees are actually really good at managing moisture for themselves. They do need moisture and even condensation in the hive, but in places where they can use it. So with a condensing hive, you have no top entrance, so the only airflow and the only bee access is in the bottom. But the idea is that you are insulating the top of the hive so well above the cluster that it will never be cold enough for condensation to form. So the heat of the cluster obviously is gonna rise, it's gonna hit the roof of the hive, and it's warm enough right there with all your insulation that it's not gonna rain down on the bees. Now, at the edges of the box where there are no bees and it's not right above the cluster, you are gonna get a bit of condensation, but that's where the bees can go out and access it because they need water to fully digest honey, and they need water, especially when it comes to brood rearing, kind of in the earlier parts of spring. So, allowing the bees to manage their moisture like that has worked really well. I do really believe in the condensing hive model, but I also work with my husband, and we have to compromise, and so we have some of each.
So we're less than 90 days away from bees flying. Well, 60 days, actually. You said they will begin some cleansing flights. What are they going to find when they fly? What's going on up there? What's the first thing that they get to work on up in Terrace?
Oh, it's a while until the first thing comes out, which is really, like our willow trees, but that won't be until the very end of March. Um,
Oh,
so for a while, they're still relying on those in-hive food stores. Occasionally, we'll put a pollen patty on, especially if it's really warm and they're doing a lot of flight, then we'll try and beat the pollen flow just by, like, a week or 2. We don't wanna get too far out in front of it, but just to support their brood rearing a bit if it's warm and they're really active.
what kind of flows do you anticipate as the season continues up in Terrace?
We're in a really unique situation up here because there is no agriculture at all in or around Terrace.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
so we're a mountain valley. There's not that much flat land and no commercial agriculture. We do have a lot of like backyard fruit trees, backyard gardens, but it's all very small, like individual or market farm scale. So our bees are really foraging on wild forage primarily, which for us is a lot of fireweed, especially up in the mountains. It's a thing that we chase, but even in the valley, everybody's bees are into fireweed when it's blooming.
I
What kind of
Oh, go ahead, Carrie.
what kind of honey does that produce? Is it a darker honey then, or?
No, it's about as light as it gets. They call it the
Oh,
champagne of honeys. Yeah, and in a
oh, wow.
good year, it's like water white, just
Oh my
gorgeous.
goodness.
Of course, it varies a little bit year to year. It is delightful. The flavor of honey follows its color, so, like, light means kind of bright and mild in flavor, but very unique, just buttery smooth. And Donnie's smiling because I know he loves it.
I do love it, and I think we might be in the here in Oregon, the southern extent of where fireweed honey can be produced. And I remember seeing one of your posts, and you pointing out something that I think beekeepers have known for a long time. It's fickle. It's a fickle honey flow. Can you tell us what you've learned over the years about fireweed flows?
Yeah, I talked to somebody in Oregon at the conference there last year who was asking exactly that. Like, I get up there, and some years I get it, and some years I don't, and that's part of it is you can be standing in a field of purple surrounded by fireweed, and the bees might not be foraging on it. So, there's a couple things I know and then a couple things that I think maybe I know. So, what I know is that they only forage on it or it's only giving nectar at pretty high temperatures. I'm gonna have to do some Fahrenheit conversion, but it's like 23 degrees Celsius is kind of the starting point. So that's 70 or warmer, I think, isn't it? So fairly warm, and especially since most fireweed happens at elevation, you need to be hitting those temperatures up high. Other things that I think I know is I think that it is really dependent on a snowpack in the summer, so it is a very deep-rooted plant. And I think that we see the best fireweed flows when there's kind of that long-term moisture down in the ground that we only get from kind of trickle melting snow. And then the other that is like a maybe, but that we throw the idea around is that it might require some kind of like daytime, nighttime temperature differential. And
Ooh,
I've actually gone back through like historical weather data and lined it up with good fireweed years and bad fireweed years, but I would really like to do I'd like to have more data to look at that because I think that there is a potential there. But yes, it's fickle.
That would be such a cool yeah, that's a great idea. I think, yeah, people have scratched at it, but I bet you could put all that together and really forecast it.
one thing I noticed is that you run a family operation, which is something we always look forward to seeing. We started similar to you. 35 years ago, we were farming onions,
Hmm.
shallots to shallots to be exact. Then we moved into beekeeping and the onions went to the wayside but I see that you started up in a similar manner. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was never our intention to do this as a business in the beginning. We just wanted a couple backyard hives. My husband wanted to make mead. To be honest, I was quite reluctant to start, and I tried to convince him to put them in someone else's backyard instead of our backyard. But I think, like many people, it didn't take long before I realized just how amazing bees are, and those first few inspections were not as scary as I expected, and how much I mean, you probably can tell how just naturally nerdy I am, like how much there was to learn about bees. I was all consumed fairly quickly. We also, in our first hobbyist years, had a couple really great honey crops. And then you look at the price of honey and you look at all the honey your bees are making, and we kind of thought, why isn't everybody doing this? So we started slowly building up in hive numbers. Of course, there were lots of hiccups after that, but that was kind of the beginning of it all.
Maybe looking back over those years from the start that starting point, what are the key moments that have really defined your vision for your business?
Yeah, it made me chuckle the way that you asked it in the email because it was like you didn't set out to be a commercial beekeeper, and that's almost a personality trait to me. Like I've been through 3 very different careers and I didn't really set out to do any of them. They just kind of happened. And beekeeping was the same. So we were building up hive numbers just because it seemed fun and we had had a couple successful winters and why not? And then when my daughter was 6, she actually got a fairly life-changing diagnosis, and at the time, I was teaching science and math at the local middle school, and that was not very flexible. You can't just leave, like, classroom teaching because your child needs you. And so I started to make an exit plan pretty quickly from that so that I could be more flexible for my daughter, and most of that was to yeah, to start to turn the bees into something that could actually make a living for us. So I took the leap, and then in that year that we took the leap, of course, we got no honey at all. It was our worst year ever, still to this day. But ultimately, that's what forced us to diversify and to get into like the candles and eventually the hot sauces and all the different things that we sell now as products.
Okay, so
Your web
the diversification came as one of the lessons early on
Mhm.
in what you offer.
Yes, year 1 of making a go of it as a full-time business was the year that we didn't get any honey, and then we looked at these, like, buckets and buckets of beeswax, just, like, raw right out of the wax spinner that we had never used. We're like, "I guess it's time to do something with all of that since we have no honey to play with." Yeah, and then the first thing that we got into, like many people, was the candles, and it just kept going from there. After that, we decided, even with our honey harvest, are there ways to add value to this honey? Some years honey is going to be limited, other years it's going to feel quite unlimited when we're only selling like direct at a farmer's market. So, what can we do with this kind of extra honey to turn it into something that people will buy?
But you're so far from large markets.
Yeah, that's a blessing and a curse. I People are so excited to have a local producer in town, like, the support that we get from our community, I think there's 12,000 people in the town where we live, and they honestly we make about 40% of our total income through, like, our farmers market and local markets. They support our family, our that small community of 12,000 people, so the demand is there.
Can you describe the scope of your beekeeping community in your area there? Or are there any is there a beekeeping community there or meetings or associations or anything like that up there?
We don't have a club, unfortunately. There are probably 50 beekeepers in town. We do get together at a bar like once a year at the end of the season just to kind of chat and have a little social, but so far there hasn't been anybody wanting to put the work into making it more formal than that. We have a Facebook page that encompasses a bigger part of the province. The next beekeeper who is at a similar scale to us is about 3 hours away. We measure distances in hours in Canada, so they're about 250 kilometers or 150 miles away. And, yeah, aside from that, I would say the broader community that I really rely on is all online, is all virtual, mostly through Instagram.
Okay.
Perfect.
So, yeah, tell us about that, 'cause I was looking at one of the posts that you had where it's a kind of a blessing and a curse. Like, it is a blessing in that you have all of there are people in Oregon who know you really well, but then, you have everybody. It's like, it's suddenly this huge, community that sort of comes through a fire hose at you.
Yeah, I think the way that I interact on Instagram has changed a lot since the beginning. I think like most small businesses, you go on there thinking like, "I need to sell my product." And so that's how I started, and I found that I just wasn't loving it. What I really loved was communicating with other beekeepers, but then you're still in this business headset where it's like, well, I have to or mindset where, like, I have to sell something. So, okay, I'll sell some education. And I've done workshops and done courses and stuff to a virtual audience. So it's nice that it gives me access to people outside, my little corner of British Columbia. But as I started kind of interacting more with other beekeepers instead of general public, what I realized was it was the community aspect of it that I just loved. Like, I don't even wanna sell you something, I just want to, like, have community with you. Um,
Nice.
and so it does come through a fire hose sometimes. During bee season, like, my private messages are just slammed every day with questions from people like, "What do I do? My bees are doing this." But I enjoy it. It's something I just kind of put my feet up at the end of the day and get back to people, and so many, like, real friendships have formed out of it that I find it very worthwhile. So, there's the broader audience, and then I have all my little kinda, like, group chats where we have the more meaningful relationships there.
I was thinking about a previous podcast we had with Karen Finley, and her moment the thing that she remembers is she would go down to Almonds and the Turlock truck stop. There was some place in Turlock
That's it.
where all of these beekeepers would get together, and it was kind of a great way to kinda get to know your community, and I imagine in some ways you're the hub of a lot of people who are beginning, but you probably also you've connected to mentors who you wouldn't have locally, or people who tell us a little bit about that interaction. How does that happen?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I end up being the one a lot of hobbyists come to, but then I have my people that I go to when I have questions and like, "Hey, how did you do this?" I know there's a lot of YouTubers that are really, like, better known, but my happy place is on Instagram. So, like, Jose Uribe, who is California beekeeper,
Mhm.
he's someone that I chat with a lot when I have questions about, like, how is this done in a commercial context. Tom Cinquini, who is one of your own in Oregon, has been amazing when I have kind of commercial-oriented questions. And then occasionally I'll get onto the Facebook groups, but I try and stay away from those because there's a few too many opinions in a lot of those for me.
I guess one last thing I wanted to ask about this is Harry and I have had this conversation a bit, and we've been talking about like beekeepers who are younger than the two of us and who are kind of finding new ways to plug in. You're interesting because on the one hand, you have an online presence, but you're also a member of the BCHPA, the Honey Producers Association. How do you see those two things, the old kind of, I hate to use this word, but legacy organizations and the kind of new things that are sprouting up? How do you think they should, they can interact together and work together?
I think they're so important, though the legacy organizations. Like for me, as someone who is far removed from people, to get out and go to those conferences once or twice a year is everything. And it makes me sad that a lot of people are finding all of their bee education on YouTube but nowadays, because I think that getting together in a room with like-minded people and learning together has a value that you will never get on YouTube. So I do still want to put my effort into making it out to those conferences. I'm hoping that through like being on the executive, and I hope that I can help to draw people from the online space into the in-person space.
We've always said that the expense for travel and motels and the conference and banquets is all really returned out in the hallway, visiting
Yeah.
with fellow beekeepers. And the learning and teaching is all secondary.
Yeah, it's so true. I would pay the airfare and the conference registration fee just for, like, the drink that you have at the social with someone new and learn all about them and how they do things.
Let's squeeze a second in here or two talking about queens. I see that you do raise your own queens. Do you buy them? Do you import stock that you prefer?
We buy queens for our nuke sales in the spring. So, because our season is so compressed, beekeepers really want their bees, as soon as bees are flying at the beginning of May or by mid-May so that they can get a reasonable season in. So that means that we need nukes ready before we're able to raise queens for them. So we import those first round of queens. We usually keep like a dozen for ourselves just so that we can track, like, did we like those queens that we got this year? How did they perform for us? Do we wanna keep them, change them? And to introduce some new genetics once in a while. Aside from those kind of new dozen that we get every year, everything else for our operation we raise from our own preferred stock.
Nice.
So we really go hard in, and we don't use mating nukes, we don't use the mini nukes, we use full size, like, deep equipment. So usually when we're replacing a queen, that colony will get a whole nuke, or we'll pull the queen out and requeen that one with another graft, and eventually it will go through the year as a nuke. So we're not just raising queens, we're constantly raising a battery of nukes that we can use however we need to.
You must have a very narrow window in terrace for queen mating up there.
We do, and our weather can be very challenging. I will often graft around and have great emergence, and then they just will not get an opportunity to mate for 2
Right.
weeks of pouring rain, so it's like, scrap those ones and start again.
Yeah.
Those are just kind of the challenges of living where we do, and we compensate by just making more so that we always have enough to account for some failure.
While we're
So
on this
you're looking
topic, oh, sorry, go ahead, Harry. I keep
no, you're looking at
stepping on
you're
you.
looking at July and August, late June.
Late June, yep, I'll usually graft my first round, like, the first week of June, but it's a real maybe whether those ones will get mated, or, I'll
Oh,
try,
wow.
but then it'll be weather dependent whether they get a day to fly and mate.
Well, I think that's really commendable that you work in such restricted conditions and produce queens that you really prefer. I mean, because we're crybabies here in Oregon. I'm just going to tell you that right now, and we get a lot of rain on and off too. We have the similar, but we do have a larger window. So I'll keep
Yeah,
you in mind next time.
we have a compressed season, but the especially when it comes to honey production, like, the length of the day really makes up for it. So, my bees in July are foraging from 5 in the morning until 11 o'clock at night. Like, just
Oh,
the
wow,
length of our day is incredible, and the bees
wow.
really make use of the whole thing, I think, feeling that pressure of the short season.
Maybe just to round things out then, we're really the tight coordination of being able to take these colonies after this exceptionally long winter and get them to peak size to hit those long days. What have you learned over the years? What are some of the tricks to getting that timing pulled off?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we've learned that there is a trade-off. The trade-off for us is between making nukes in the spring or getting a spring honey flow. We cannot do both. No matter how many ways we try, it doesn't happen. If we choose to make nukes and reduce our colony sizes down, then we have it timed perfectly. If we miss the spring honey flow, then they're going to be ready and productive for the fireweed flow that happens in July and the first couple weeks of August. I would like to get to a point where we're only pulling nukes out of half of our colonies and that we can leave half of them for production, but we're the only ones in a fairly large area to meet demand for nukes. And so for now, we haven't had a reason like why should we cap nukes when people are willing to pay for them right now, to chase a maybe honey flow.
Harry, is there anything that we left out or anything that you want to pick up before we wrap it up?
Well, I really watch and admire with interest a family operation that doesn't have 10 million beehives, that really makes everything count and makes it all work as a unit. And it's very inspirational to me, having known some of the old timers that are now gone in my area that had 35 hives or had 60 and a family operation. And I love that. And I just have really enjoyed seeing what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Now it's my turn. I have to say, I think you're one of the best science communicators in apiculture. You do such a great job of getting information out in a concise, relatable manner. So, me too.
Thank you. Very high praise from you. Wow.
Well, good luck with the rest of the season. We're glad that we caught up with you to hear a little bit about your operation, and yeah, best of luck in 2026.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks for coming on PolliNation.
Thank you so much for listening. Show notes with links from each episode are available at the website pollinationpodcast.oregonstate.edu. I also love hearing from you, and there's a form at the website where you can pop in and say hello and give me feedback. If you want to support the show, remember to leave a rating on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever podcast mothership you use. And finally, if you have the means and you want to help support my lab's effort to document bee biodiversity in Oregon, visit OregonBeeAtlas.org and follow down to the donate button where you can make a tax-deductible donation to the Jerry and Judith Paul Native Pollinator Endowment. Every little bit helps. See you next episode.